There's a completely new rune page that has taken over on Annie recently. Phantom Dancer is super underrated on Senna after its recent buffs, and Kraken Slayer is sleeper OP on a few champs as well. So we've got all this and so much more to cover in today's video as we bring you guys 10 of the most OP new builds or rune setups for patch 25.15. And did you know that each game you queue up with the wrong build is another game where you're playing with a self-imposed handicap and just throwing away LP? That's why we've worked tirelessly to create the ultimate ADC itemization course. While others blindly follow recommended builds, you'll be dynamically adapting your purchases for maximum impact in every situation. This isn't just theory. You'll get side-by-side damage comparisons of items so that you know exactly why one is better than the others. The course features 24 in-depth videos with each ADC getting their own complete analysis, from which rush items are the best to what your later game purchases should look like. Wondering when to build Kraken versus Yuntal and Yanara? We break down the math with frame-by-frame comparisons. Is crit actually better than on-hit builds for Vayne? We have the answers. So why handicap yourself with cookie cutter builds this season when you can be running the optimal setup on every single ADC? For access to this new course along with thousands of hours of additional premium content, click the link in the description below. And with that said, let's get into it. So with Kledd's mini rework going live last patch, there's been a multitude of builds popping up on him, but one in particular that is working extremely well that is super underrated consists of rushing Hullbreaker. It's a very side lane focused build as you go into Titanic Hydra second for the added shoving power, while Overlord's Bloodmail is slotted in third for a big spike in damage. With Titanic and Hullbreaker, you're really maximizing the amount of value that you can get out of Overlord's passive while sticking to bruiser items. Titanic offers up 600 health and Hullbreaker gives 500, and if you add that to the 550 of Overlords, you get a grand total of 1650. Since 2.5% of your bonus health is converted into AD, 2.5% of 1650 is equal to 41 AD. And on top of all this, all the health synergizes really nicely with Kledd's new passive, where he converts his bonus health into armor and magic resist. The resist scaling on Kledd's passive is even buffed for this patch, going from 1 scaling to 2% bonus health to now a flat 2.5% bonus health, so a big win for this setup. Kledd's W also scales off of bonus health now, so it's all around a great synergistic setup for Kledd. It's not just the build that is underrated either, as the best performing keystone rune on Kledd is actually Grasp instead of Conqueror. This makes a ton of sense because with Kledd's health stacking build, he gains more value from Grasp since the damage and healing from the rune scales off of max health. AD Twisted Fate is back due to the recent item changes and even being played in solo queue by a bunch of pro players. To be clear, this is specifically for top lane Twisted Fate, as mid lane is still better played AP. Kraken Slayer is currently top lane Twisted Fate's highest win rate rush item, sitting up over 51%, and the AD variant builds are popping off in solo queue. Of all the variations being played right now, the 3-item core of Kraken into Phantom Dancer and then Fire Cannon is excelling the most. So you'll be going for an E max with this build and basically just heavily playing off those Kraken and E procs due to having so much attack speed from this setup. You also get a ludicrous amount of movement speed from the build, with Kraken offering 4%, Phantom Dancer providing 10%, and then Fire Cannon dishing out another 4%. So the kiting strength with the build is incredible as you're just consistently tossing out gold cards and spacing very easily with all your movement speed. Since you already have so much attack speed from the build, Press the Attack is going to work really well for the Keystone rune to provide a bit more damage. It's definitely not troll to run Lethal Tempo as it's still performing quite well on TF, but PTA is the more optimal choice. You also want to be grabbing Demolish in runes as your main objective with this build is to be an absolute pest in the side lane. For quite a while now, Briar has had 2 standard rush items, being Blade of the Ruined King and Titanic Hydra, but that has started to change as of last patch. With Kraken Slayer receiving buffs in 25.14, it's actually looking like a very competitive rush option for Briar now. On the analytical front, Kraken is currently Briar's highest win rate rush item, outperforming Blade of the Ruined King and Titanic Hydra by over 1%. It's such a unique build all around because even though you rush Kraken Slayer, it's still bruiser items that are most optimal from then on out, with Titanic Hydra second and Black Cleaver third. So you go Kraken Slayer for a more offensive 1-item spike, and then transition to Bruiser so that you can be a more reliable threat in mid to late game skirmishes. The rune page to go along with this build consists of Press the Attack, followed by Triumph, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace, while Free Boots and Cosmic Insight are for secondaries. A second jungler who you'll want to go back to prioritizing Kraken Slayer on for 25.15 is Viego. For quite a while now, it's been Trinity Force as the standard rush item on Viego, but due to those Kraken buffs, it has now overtaken Trinity Force by a pretty wide margin. Kraken has around a 2% better win rate than Trinity Force now, which is very significant. The one downside to going for Kraken is that it does leave you a lot more squishy, as you are missing out on that 333 health that Trinity Force would provide. If you're playing into a comp who is majority tanky, then going Trinity Force still makes sense, but when playing into a more squishy comp, you definitely want to side with Kraken. Kraken will be dealing more consistent damage for you, and it's also 333 gold cheaper than Trinity Force now, so there's definitely way more incentive to picking up the item. The complete core that you'll want to rush is a Kraken rush into the Collector second and Immortal Immortal Shield Bow third. It will be Conqueror for the Keystone rune with Triumph, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace, followed by Freeboots and Cosmic Insight for secondaries. So there's a brand new build and rune page that Annie players have been taking in recent patches, so let's break it down. First, starting with the build, it's a more durable core that consists of running Bloodletter's Curse second and Rylai's third, while Malignance is still the rush. You get 800 health from this build, which makes the setup more forgiving than the usual Storm Surge. It's really the rune page that ties everything together though, as you take Phase Rush for the Keystone rune. The movement speed boost from Phase Rush combined with the slow from Rylai's is going to make Annie so much more difficult to kill. One of Annie's main drawdowns has always been the fact that she's shorter ranged and is easy to catch out, but by running this build you alleviate a lot of that weakness. A lot of pros have been playing this exact setup in solo queue, however it's still yet to catch on with the general player base. Less than 10% of Annie players have been running Phase Rush at the time of making this video, so despite pros spamming it, the average Annie player is not. And just going off the analytics to back things up even further, Phase Rush currently has a 2% better win rate than Electrocute. Kraken Slayer has become a legitimate rush option on a bunch more champs after its 25.14 buffs, and one of those champs is Yasuo. For quite a while now, Blade of the Ruined King has been the cookie cutter rush on Yasuo, but Kraken Slayer will be the superior DPS option on that one item spike. So what it really comes down to is whether or not you value the sustain that Blade of the Ruined King will provide. In matchups where the enemy has a ton of poke, or in a hard matchup where you're just looking to survive, rushing Blade still makes sense. In an easier lane though, where you have an early game advantage or a matchup where you know you won't be getting poked out significantly, opting for Kraken so that you have stronger all-in power is the play. The full 3-item core is going to revolve around Kraken Slayer into Shield Bow second and Infinity Edge third. Lethal Tempo should be your Keystone rune with Absorb Life, Alacrity, and Last Stand, followed by Second Wind and Overgrowth for secondaries. Kai'Sa is back in a really great spot after the recent Kraken Slayer buffs, and there's a new third item that is starting to be played to some really good success on the champ. Instead of taking Nashor's Tooth and going for the W evolve, it's Terminus that's being played a lot more recently, providing higher DPS in fights. If we take a look at a few damage tests here, we can see that when hitting a squishy target who has 2000 health and 60 resists, the damage from Nashor's and Terminus is very similar. We just used a Q into 7 autos for the combo as well, so if you were to land W, Nashor's would definitely win out a little more. Where things really shift in favor of Terminus though is when you're trying to take down a bruiser or a tank. If we hit a target who has 3000 health and 110 resists, Terminus heavily outperforms here, dealing 543 DPS over 11 autos and 1 Q, while Nashor's is coming in at 503 DPS. So there's definitely merit to running Nashor's into a comp who's more squishy, as your poke from W will definitely be more impactful there. But if you're playing into a comp who has 2 or more bruisers or tanks, then Terminus is going to help way more in your ability to take down that front line in fight. The rune page to go along with the build is Lethal Tempo with Triumph, Alacrity, and Cutdown, while Freeboots and Biscuits are the best secondaries. For the longest time now, Yuntal had overshadowed Kraken Slayer as Ash's rush item, but due to the Kraken buffs from 25.14, that has now changed. Prior to the Kraken buffs, Yuntal as a rush was winning about 1% more. With Kraken buffs now live, the items are now in direct parity with Kraken, and Yuntal winning at the exact same rate at 52%. So for an ADC like Ash, who's very early to mid-game dominant and wants to be able to push an advantage as much as possible, going for Kraken makes a ton of sense now. Yuntal will still be the better scaling option, but it takes a while to come online as you've got to stack up the crit. It still makes more sense to prioritize Yuntal on an ADC like Jinx because you more so want to play for that mid to late game power, but with Ash, she doesn't scale super well anyways, so putting more emphasis on that early game spike is the way to go. So with both Kraken Slayer and Phantom Dancer buffed in 25.14, those are the 2 core items you will be looking to run on Ash, followed up with Infinity Edge third. Ash is back in an S tier spot now as a result of the item changes, so definitely a champ worth picking up here in 25.15. The rune page you'll run consists of Lethal Tempo with Presence of Mind, Alacrity, and Cutdown, while Biscuits and Approach Velocity are for secondaries. A build that has been around a little bit in the past but never really caught traction that is now incredibly powerful for 25.15 is Phantom Dancer Senna. So the thing about Senna is that she's a very vulnerable champion who lacks a gap closer, so positioning well in fights is very important. This is what makes Phantom Dancer so great on her, and while it's currently outperforming Rapid Fire Cannon, as PD now offers up 10% movement speed, which is 6% higher than what you get from Fire Cannon. The overall mobility of Senna is so much better with Phantom Dancer now, and it makes kiting around in fights a lot smoother. In its more limited sample size so far, Phantom Dancer is by far the highest win rate second item option on Senna, and then you still rush the Black Cleaver. So it's Bloodsong with Black Cleaver, and Phantom Dancer is your core on Senna that you need to really try for 25.15. For Senna's rune page, it's going to be Fleet for the Keystone rune with Presence of Mind, Alacrity, and Cutdown, while Bone Plating and Revitalize are for secondaries. So in 25.14, Guardian got some pretty under-the-radar changes that have made it stronger on Enchanter supports. One Enchanter in specific who's been seeing a lot more success with the rune over the past patch is Soraka. Riot changed Guardian so that the shield AP ratio went up from 12.5 to 15%. The base shield went up as well, and then the damage threshold to proc the Guardian shield was lowered. So all around, some really nice buffs to Guardian, and it's made the rune way more appealing in matchups where the enemy duo has a lot of burst threat. Let's say you're playing Soraka and going up against a Leona Tristana or a Nautilus Draven. Basically any matchup that has a ton of instant catch and burst threat. Guardian is going to provide really good value for you. Your whole goal as an enchanter against melee engaged supports is to survive their initial onslaught, and then if you do that, you'll be able to turn and win out on the extended fight. Soraka especially, because she is a champ who has a ton of healing potential, so as long as she doesn't die instantly, she's going to be incredibly impactful in a prolonged fight. So for the full rune page, it's Guardian with Font of Life, Bone Plating, and Revitalize, while Biscuits and Cosmic Insight are for secondaries. The build to go along with this rune setup will be Moonstone, followed by Redemption, and then Celestial Opposition for the item upgrade. Alright guys, one last thing, our rank up guarantee is insane. It's like signing up for the gym and getting a refund if you don't get ripped. That's how confident we are in SkillCapped. We obsess over making the best guides with top players, rigorous testing, and top tier video editing to make your climb easy. If you're ready to level up, visit SkillCapped.com and see the difference. So there you have it everyone, a complete look at 10 of the most OP new builds and rune setups for 25.15. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one.